Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Johanna Scholzer. I'm a business psychologist with Thrive, and in this session we want to address financial well-being, how financial stress affects our health, and discuss strategies to manage your finances. So financial well-being entails the feeling of security and control about paying bills, being able to deal with the unexpected, and just feeling empowered and confident to manage finances in the long term. So unfortunately, money is a common source of stress for many of us. In fact, like more than 70% of people are stressed about money, and whether it's about paying rent or household bills or just debt. And financial stress is strongly linked to our physical and mental health, and may act cyclical, as financial stress can lead to poor mental health, which can lead to increasingly poor financial health, and so on. And this is why I'm really delighted to be joined by our wonderful guest panelists today, who will share their expertise today. We have Darren with us, who is a partner at Secondsight, which is a multi-award winning employee benefits and wellbeing financial education specialist. Darren is passionate about financial education and communication and making a difference to people's financial lives. We have Lee, who is the founder and manager of IncomeMax, which is a community interest company and social enterprise that supports people in making sense of the benefits and tax credit entitlement. His vision is that every family has enough money and support to thrive. And finally, we have Jerry, who is the CEO and co-founder of Money A&E, which empowers individuals by providing accessible, independent and effective money advice and education. So Jerry is really passionate about providing money advice and education to people in the local community, and having encountered money issues in his family in the past. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you, everyone. Today we will discuss some key topics, then open the floor up to our audience if any questions remain. And my first question for you guys is, why do you think financial well-being is a significant concern? And this is, feel free to discuss and share your expertise.
Happy to jump in. I don't know if you want me to start, guys, but
I'll let Lee go forward. Yeah.
Happy to hop in. I think the key thing there, Johanna, is yes, it's a massive concern. Financial well-being is obviously of absolute importance. My friend Chris Budd, who he has a podcast about financial well-being. He says it's not just about money, but it's actually about a meaningful life. And I think that's the thing, is that the impact on people's health, opportunities, and all that kind of thing. Financial well-being really kind of, it has a big impact on that. You mentioned some of the statistics. When I was kind of doing some research on this particular event, I think you're 4 times more likely to be experiencing anxiety or depression if you're money stressed. So, and obviously we know that mental health has a huge impact on people's lives, on their overall well-being. So that link between money and mental health is absolutely huge. And I mean, some of the statistics that you can actually find on this are scary. One particular statistic, 71% of adults, the unexpected bills that they find a struggle to pay every year, and 11.1 million people don't save currently. So you can imagine that's 11.1 working adults, which is why I think the government is starting to take this seriously. And they've got a financial strategy for financial well-being that they're just about to put in place, which looks at things like financial education, saving, credit, debt advice, and obviously has a focus on the future around retirement as well. So the big answer there is yes, financial well-being is a huge problem.
Yeah, I'd also like to echo all of what Lee has just said. And basically, poor financial well-being has an impact on your sleep. People have reduced productivity. There's low morale for employees as well. And basically, in terms of the stats, there's 5.3 million people who during the lockdown have basically experienced spikes of high levels of anxiety. And there is some Money and Pension Service, they're a national organisation who have done some research recently that have showed that up to 13 million people have less than £50 in savings, and this is before the COVID crisis. And nearly 50%, 47% of people, that's 24 million people, are struggling with sort of household bills. So this really shows that, this is an issue that isn't just happening to the person down the street. It's likely to be happening to someone or potentially it could be happening to yourself at some point in your life as well. So it is a very big concern for all of us, I think, in society generally. So there are large sort of economic impacts that the pandemic is having on many households, and these figures are only going to escalate and get worse as time goes on. So it's a massive concern, and not only for households, but also for employees and employers in their workplaces.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. So it is really important. I'll tell you why. The reason is that most mental health problems are triggered by money worries, the majority of them. And studies have shown that 90% of people that suffer with mental health problems say that their financial situation is worsening it. And it comes from a feeling out of control. We can only control what we can control, and things that are out of control, we need to find a way to take control of most things financial to reduce the stress. Out of control means we feel stress. And 80% of financial well-being and 80% of the success with any financial well-being strategy for somebody is psychology. Most people in my industry talk about the mechanics all the time, talk about the products and the tools that are available out there. But at the end of the day, it's getting the mind right, the mindset right. That's why it's so inextricably linked to mental health. And how it affects people, that was part of the question, is that if you are stressed short term, it's a motivator. If you get if you do a budget plan and you see how much you're spending on nonsense, that can be an emotional moment that you make a good decision, and that's a motivator. If you're stressed every day, you wake up in the morning and you start thinking about money and worrying about money, that produces cortisol in our system. And what we want to be doing is reduce cortisol. It makes us go into flight or fight syndrome. And what that does, it affects our body chemistry, it affects our mood, it affects our cholesterol levels, everything. What we want to be doing is flicking that and turning it, putting people in control, and then they produce serotonin. And serotonin is great for the health. It's a happy hormone. They're optimistic and they're creative, and it's really good for employers to try to move their employees into that lovely place. And we're never going to get everyone there, but it's going to be a lifelong challenge to try to push people into that place.
I think coming in just around the mental health impacts, it's so important. Martin Lewis's Money and Mental Health Policy Institute talk about the cycle and the fact that obviously mental health problems and financial difficulties work in a cycle. So sometimes if you've got a mental health difficulty, it can make dealing with money and being in control, as Darren quite rightly says, really, really difficult. But at the same time, financial difficulty can also then take you into the world of anxiety and depression and stress. So the two are linked, and the good news is that we are, as a society, we're taking money and mental health really, really seriously. So you've got initiatives like the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute. You've got the government sort of putting funding and resources into the UK strategy for financial well-being. You've got charities and third sector and social enterprises and businesses really starting to take financial well-being seriously, whether that's for your employees or whether it's for the customers that you serve, like Jerry and I. So I think we're talking about this, thankfully, which is amazing, but there is a lot of work to do. And some of it is, unfortunately, not just within the control of individuals, because obviously you have things like employees obviously need to be paid enough to be able to live. If you're on benefits, you need to be able to have enough money to live on so that you can at least have a decent life and actually work with the money that you've got. Obviously, things like over-indebtedness is a huge problem, and some of that comes back down to behaviours and the way that we kind of have used credit over the years to buy things when perhaps we shouldn't have been using credit, because actually, it's something that we can't afford. Affordability is a big word these days in the sector that we inhabit around debt advice and income maximisation. So it's good that we're talking about these things, but there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of work to go on to try and create financial well-being as a better thing for people, I think.
Yeah, I have a first-hand experience of a very good friend of mine who was ex-military, had quite a few issues he was carrying around in his head, and took his own life 2 years ago. And it was obviously really, really sad. But what really annoyed me and frustrated me was that 2 days before he took his own life, he'd actually just run out of money. And it kind of boosted my endeavour. It really forced me to narrow my focus into the link between financial and emotional well-being. And I know that if we can do some good work out there, we can help employers with employees, and we can improve the financial well-being of thousands of people. What I know in my heart of hearts, we are saving a few lives along the way as well. I don't know who it's going to be, but thankfully we'll never need to know if we can get them going down the right road and catch them early.
I think you're completely right, Darren, and thank you everyone for saying that, because I think, yeah, you're right, this is a significant topic and it has such a big impact to our life and our well-being. So yeah, we really need to be conscious of things we can do and how we can improve our financial well-being in general. My next question for you guys would be, do organizations have a responsibility to support financial well-being of their employees? And can you give any examples of how they can do that?
Yeah, I mean, I can kick off with this one. I mean, I think as an employer, both being an employer and employee, but as an employer, there is generally a kind of legal responsibility for our staff, which is important. We've got lots of health and safety regulations. I think there's a moral responsibility just in terms of the kind of community that we inhabit, the society that we inhabit. We're caring about our neighbours, and especially about our employees. And I think lastly, there is a business responsibility as well. And I mean, it kind of makes business sense that if we're seeing from all the things that we're hearing here about financial well-being and mental well-being having an impact on people's morale, on people's anxiety and depression levels, and the fact that this actually makes them less productive in some way, there is clearly, I would say, a business responsibility to try and ensure that our staff's financial and mental well-being are really being taken care of, so that it's going to actually affect how our businesses basically perform in the workplace. And also it's just making sure that the general health and care of our staff is there. I mean, at Money Any, we see people coming in who are employed all the time. And I'll just share a story of Ruth, who was an executive assistant. She was really well paid, but she was unexpectedly made redundant. And, after COVID, that's going to be the situation for a number of different people as businesses begin to kind of deal with the financial implications that the lockdown has caused. So she basically really suffered in silence and struggled with this until her debts got to about £12,000. She was on antidepressants, and she said when she went to bed at night, it would just be swirling around, replaying in her mind constantly. So she wasn't sleeping. And she said, one thing she said that I thought was really kind of poignant was that you talk to your friends about your health, about relationships, but you never talk to them about money. And that was something that I thought, yeah, that's very true of many of the clients that we see. There's a kind of shame around money and the problems that people have, and a denial sometimes, but definitely isolation. People don't want to talk about it. So what she did when she came into us, basically, she spoke to some of our advisors, and they helped to kind of sort it out and map out a strategy of different things she could do, and these are expert sort of legal advisors to support her through that. And then she also entered some training programs. At Money Any, we do money advice, but we also do education training programs as well. And she said that through that, it really gave her a lot of strength. And after speaking to her pretty recently, she said that for the first time since the COVID pandemic happened, she was able to have quite a large savings buffer that really helped her to essentially get through this really difficult time. So for her, it was really important to have that saving, and from the advice and the training, she's now in a much better place, and she feels really resilient and wasn't really worried about money issues during the lockdown. So for her, that was just one kind of story of how it can affect an employee, and she's actually back in work now as well, working as an executive assistant as well. So poor financial well-being does affect sleep. It reduces your productivity and your morale, and anxiety and depression are very big things. Cognitive overload is another thing that happens. It means that you can't cope with too much information. And there is, as I mentioned again, inertia and this dip in concentration and productivity. So it's really important that we really address this if we want our staff and employees to be performing to the best they can, so that our businesses can sustain themselves and survive and do what they need. So I would say that those are kind of the reasons we want to be concerned about it. And I would also say that, yeah, there's lots of kind of statistical information, evidence that Lee and Darren have already explained about the impact. So yeah, it's really important, I think, that that employers take this seriously, and the well-being of our staff and employees is really important.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the question was, do organisations have a responsibility? And I think absolutely they do. And the key thing is that, yes, they need it for shareholders, and yes, they need it because the staff are more productive and all those things. But I actually find the companies I've worked with, where they actually do it for the right reasons, they actually do it because they care, they get much more traction. When they do it because they want to do it, because it's just the right thing to do, you get much more positive outcomes from any kind of intervention. So I think it is a responsibility from a moral standpoint, but also I think from a profitability standpoint. But I think that's got to be secondary. You know, it'll come, the money will come, you know. But the first thing I have to say is I think the employers need to understand it. And I don't think they really do. It's kind of, it's like the poor relation to emotional well-being and physical well-being. And I think the reason is it's quite complex. There's not a lot of people that can really understand it. There's a lot of people in the market who say they're financial well-being experts, but last year they were business development, or also one worked in a shop. You know, everyone's kind of given themselves this title now, and there's too many of them come to market. All you've got to do really is look on LinkedIn, see what they were doing 6 months or a year ago to see what credibility they've got. So from an employer perspective, they need to understand it, and they need to understand it's 80% of it's psychological. And then we can look at the mechanics. Once we get people to want to do things, we get people to want to save, to want to get out of debt, to want to have a future. When the motivation's there, we can then provide them with the tools and the support to help them get there. That makes it easier. But if they're motivated enough, they'll go and find it on Google anyway. But in terms of understanding it, there's a load more to this, but there's 4 things which make up good financial well-being. And one is habits. People need to learn to live within their means. It's something we used to do in the old days. We've got out the habit now. We've got credit cards. We've got Amazon Buy It now. We've got social media marketing bombarding us, building desire to buy stuff, and then making it really easy to have it. And when it arrives, you know, did you really need it? And I always say to people, add it to your cart and wait for 24 hours, see if you still want it, you know. So living within means is important. Solid economic foundations is absolutely crucial. And that means having an emergency fund, having no high interest debt, and having your family situation taken care of. So that means making sure you've got a protection and some basic estate planning, maybe a will written, so that that's taken out of your mind. You know that's all good. Those solid economic foundations, emergency fund, and no high interest debt, and the family protection is important. Then the next piece of that is that people need to have they need to be living within a tolerable level of financial stress. Okay, it's going to come and go for sure. You know, the world keeps changing. We get presented with new problems all the time. It's about how resilient we are psychologically and physically with money to actually cope with those problems when they come. That's really important. And the 4th thing, my favourite, because it comes from a real psychological standpoint, is people need to have goals. They need to have future focused objectives and a plan to achieve them, and to feel that they're making progress towards them. Whether that's to come from a debt situation to zero, whether it's to go from zero to savings, or whether that's from a good savings position to a better one. But always focus on what they want. And when their goals are bigger than the problems that get presented with them in life, they can overcome the problem. But when they haven't got the big goals and the dreams and the aspirations, and they haven't thought that through, then any problem can be a brick wall in their way. So from a psychological standpoint, having those things and getting people into the mindset to want to do that, that's the challenge. It is hard when they're really desperate, but not everybody's desperate, you know. But you imagine how well prepared people would have been at the start of COVID if they all had an emergency fund, they had some medium-term investments. What they get at work is just a pension. But we need to look at the other. We need to look at the 3 buckets of financial planning, and a good employee benefits package, well communicated and finely tuned, can provide a really solid financial wellbeing platform. But they get ignored because most people that deal with this are not even qualified or experienced to even have an opinion on an employee benefits package, because it comes with regulation and stuff like that. So that's kind of my thoughts are, is understanding what it is. Employers need to understand it so they know what they're aiming for. Then they need to kind of identify what the needs of their staff are, what their wants are, get their foundation solid, but then put together their strategy for their company, not something off the shelf. If it comes off the shelf and you stick it in, it's not going to work. It needs to be designed for the actual individual personality and character of that organization, not just something that's off the shelf and one size fits all. That'll never work.
Yeah, sorry, Lee, go on. I'll come back after you, go on.
I was just going to say, I just wanted to echo what you guys are saying there, because I think we're kind of we're touching on the moral responsibility of employers to be doing the right things for their staff, who are human beings. And one of the beautiful things that I'm seeing at the moment is, as we sort of build back better and we build back sort of obviously in this post-COVID world, I think economically, businesses now have to see their employees as human beings and not tools of the business. And I think this is an important way of being able to support people, because it's not just about paying people the bare minimum so they get up so you can get away with it, but it's actually actively looking after your employees, who are human beings and an integral part of the way that you do business. And obviously, you know, we've lived through a long time of consumerism, and you know, the planet has kind of obviously took a hit as well from an environmental perspective, but all of a sudden we've got to refocus on humans and the planet, and therefore human beings inside businesses. We need to make sure that, you know, employers are looking after the needs of their employees, of which financial well-being is a big part of that, you know. So absolutely what Jerry says is a moral obligation there. Completely, absolutely agree with what Darren says. There are nuances and subtleties to this. It's not just about paying people enough, but actually it's about supporting and empowering employees and everyone, right, in society to have the tools that they need. So I think there's a lot of things to think about as we move forward with this. But do employers have a you know, a responsibility to support this? Absolutely, that as well as the employer's mental health and support needs, because we're all human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say the way that we at Money A&E work with employers and communities in general, there's 2 key things that we do. We're a very community-focused organisation when we're dealing with sort of finances, and we think it's really important to create within the workplace a caring culture. And also another key thing we think to that is a key aspect of that is using lived experience and that kind of peer support, whether it's coaching or mentoring in some form or shape within the workplace. So to just give you examples of what those 2 things kind of mean in how we work with employers, is that in terms of creating that caring culture in the workplace, we think it's really important if you're able to kind of train and equip your leaders within your organization, your HR teams, your bosses and supervisors, to become champions of financial and mental well-being within the workplace, equipping them with tools and resources to kind of help staff if they mention elements of this and needing, knowing where to go to get support. And a lot of employers will have lots of packages and lots of things that are going on. But I think the more we talk about it, this culture of not talking about debt or mental health issues is part of the problem. And that's why people are suffering in silence. So we're able to kind of equip our leaders within the workplace to do this kind of championing and signposting and supporting and having a bit of training on how to build the habits, the tools and the resilience of employees. That'll be good. And I'm not saying they have to become experts. They just need to maybe give a few tips and know where to send people. And often lots of employers will have certain packages in place that deal with this stuff. We'll also talk about, we do workshops as well, generally for staff as well. And I think that also helps to create a culture where people have that information directly given to them, but it also begins to open up those sorts of conversations, because not talking about it is a massive part of the problem. This kind of denial, this keeping up with the Joneses and, we're all right, mate. We're not going to talk about that. We're dealing with it, because we all want to feel like we're handling our money situations. So creating that caring culture, I think, is two things, and equipping our leaders and workshops where we talk about it, across departments is really important. And I think around lived experience, I'll just do this before we kind of move on. The lived experience, I think, is also really important. At Money Amy, 75% of our workforce are people who have gone through debt or have been our customers or service users, and they've learned a lot about how to deal with finances, and they've actually become expert trainers and expert advisors around this issue. And what I would say in terms of that signposting as well, you can use services like ours, you can use services like Lee's as well, where people can potentially come and get that kind of support. Because although we're talking about a culture, these things don't change overnight. People still want to deal with this kind of stuff privately. So what's important is they know where to go and that they can get support of someone with real lived experience who can talk to them about it. They're not going to be judged. It's very empathetic and basically very supportive. And they can see someone who's either working through their issue or is, on the other side. It's like they're at the end of the tunnel. It's almost like AA or a sort of, Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have a buddy and you're both working through things together. Or it's like, a talking therapy where you can talk about it, but at the same time you get real strategies that help you get to the other side. So that's really important. And the last thing we do around this kind of caring, we've talked about the importance of our staff, but also what about the community? What about our customers? What about the next generation? And we do lots of work in the community as well. So what we try and do is link a lot of that work with employees having the opportunity to volunteer and using their lived experience as the employers and employees who have got a job, to share that with some of the disadvantaged young people that we work with, and share that knowledge and experience around employability skills as well. And sometimes that helps people when you're volunteering, helping other people. That can help you deal with your well-being issues as well, if you want to do that as well. So that's kind of one of the unique things about what we do as well. But those are kind of two key things that I would say. They're always bespoke to the employer and their needs. But I think it's important that as employers, we look at creating a caring culture within the workplace, of champions and talking about money, but also that kind of lived experience where it is private, it is hard, and we need expert support. We're going to experts who've been through it, but also know about it, can give you strategies to get to the other side. And lastly, those who want to give back, who can volunteer in the communities, helping our customers and our support and building up our kind of feeling good about ourselves in terms of giving back. Because through COVID, I think community is one of the biggest things that's come out of it. The strength and resilience we see of people who are being brothers and neighbours and good Samaritans, so to speak, supporting others in really hard situations. I think that's really important.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. I think you're completely right. And I think it's a lot about cultural change and having this open communication, which is such a taboo theme right now. So I think, you're completely right. And being conscious of time now, I would like to jump on to the next question. How do you recommend people to manage and control their finances?
Okay, I'll speak then.
Yes,
okay, so I think the key thing is, it's the psychology. So, you can give people stuff, they're not going to do it. They've got to want to do it. And, you've got to look at the motivators for people. So, what they actually need to do is to take control, and they need to take control. They need to know what is going on. And the best way to do that is to actually take some time out to do a budget planner. But we've got to get them to want to do that. Now, what we do have is an opportunity right now. And the opportunity is that there's less travel, there's less meetings. People have got a bit more time. They're working from home. Actually, I think now is the chance when we slowed right down. We're normally running at 100 miles an hour. You don't see what's going on around you at that speed. We slow right down and actually start to take control. And I think even a lot of people, we talk about people that are having money worries and stuff, but there's also a lot of people that are better off. There's a lot of people who are not spending as much at the moment. And so that extra time and maybe that extra money is now a chance to change habits and change behaviors and then condition that in. So what I really like is to sell people on the idea of doing their budget planning. And it sounds tedious and boring and all the rest of it. I'll never get a chance to do it. I'm always too busy. Now there's no excuse. So if we sell them on the benefits of doing that, they then feel in control. They can see what's going on with their financial situation. They can see where they're wasting money. And they need to be specific to them. If you tell people general information about 13 million people of this, it doesn't mean anything. It's got to be about them as an individual. When they can see their own financial situation, they can see that they're wasting money in certain areas, they have an emotional moment. And they need that. Because that emotional moment is when they make a decision. They decide to do something different. That then changes behavior. Then over time, if that behavior continues and they can start to see progress, you condition that into a habit, and that habit then serves them for a lifetime. So now is a really good chance for a lot of people who've got a bit more time on their hands. And as an employer, what we can do is to persuade them to do a budget planner. And there's a really good free one on the money advice service. It's free. I've tried it out. It's really neat and tidy, easy to use. We need to get people through that and then get to the point where they can see their own situation. And if there's something about it they don't like, that's the emotional trigger to change, to do something better.
I think it's a really good point around budgeting. I think one of the difficulties, though, is that this answer can be different depending on whereabouts you are in your life. So, for example, someone on benefits that's really struggling to make the ends meet, or having to work on a really sort of a low budget. There's a myth that people in that situation don't know how to budget, but actually quite often they do. They're actually really good at budgeting. It's just the fact that they don't have enough income coming in, and that the cost of living is too high, and that they don't have the support they need financially to be able to get to live a meaningful life. So it is a different answer, I think, depending on where you are. So, for example, for a lot of our clients, some of whom, obviously, or many of whom are working already, maximising your income is a really good starting point, because sometimes it's difficult to work with a budget when it's already a bit skewed or the income's a bit low. But if you can try and have more money to live on, then obviously you've got a chance of being able to make that budget work a bit better for you. And I don't know if you guys know, but the statistics are that billions of pounds goes unclaimed every year. And that's by either benefits that are unclaimed, but also help for energy bills, help for water bills, charitable grants. Obviously, debt advice is absolutely under-accessed. The Pension Service want an extra 2 million indebted families to be able to access debt advice over the next 10 years through the strategy for financial well-being. So I just wanted to mention that obviously sometimes, if you're in a position where you've got the resources, absolutely, you can definitely jump straight into the budget planning and try and just, stop spending all your money in whatever cafe or in the pub or whatever it is that, you like to do. But, or running trainers in my sort of thing, where I have to try and curb that. But I guess for some people, it might be that you have to really look at maximising income. And then just coming back to employers, because there's a brilliant question, actually, Johan. I don't know if you've seen about specific practical examples of employers rolling out effective methods to educate and improve financial well-being. Yeah. I'm involved in one of the challenge groups for the Money and Pension Service financial UK strategy for financial well-being. And obviously those are education, financial education, saving, credit, debt advice, and future focus, i.e. pensions. So there's certainly, from a practical perspective, employers really hold the key potentially to being able to create amazing partnerships with credit unions and affordable credit providers, for example. It's something that credit unions, a huge movement where you can get more affordable credit products as opposed to using high cost credit. Can employers encourage their employees to save by having saving schemes? Now, we already know the effect that the pensions, workplace pensions, and the way that auto-enrolment nudged people into being able to get pensions. And I think it's something that organisations like Step Change have been asking for a long time, that there's almost that kind of auto-enrolment into savings schemes. I mean, let's just go back to that statistic. 11.1 million adults in the UK don't save for either for a rainy day or for their future. So I think employers really hold the key. And then lastly, just really to say that, again, some of this is, we also need to look at the state and the way that policy works, because at the end of the day, obviously, if organisations, accreditors are overboring to people that are already over indebted and can't afford things, then that needs to change. We need more people to access debt advice when they experience financial difficulties, and we need the state to absolutely make sure employers are paying enough and that the benefit system and our financial safety net works in the way that it should do.
Yeah, again, Joanna, I'd like to echo exactly what Lee and Darren have just said. Myself and Lee are part of something called the Inclusive Economy Partnership, which really is a way of the public sector, the voluntary sector, or the not-for-profit sector, and the private sector all coming together really to look at the issue of mental health and financial well-being. I'm also part of the Money and Pension Service, which is a national organisation looking at the financial well-being of the nation. And I'm on one of those challenge groups as well as Lee. And we're really concerned looking at the things that will help people to manage and control their finances, because there are different groups of people. Like I said earlier, there's about 50% of us struggling with money issues. That's nearly half of the nation. And there are some people who will be able to do things themselves, but sometimes we need those kind of state levers to support. And I think employers play a massive part, because employers, they essentially employ, massive swathes of the population. And if we can get them on board supporting this, it's going to help. In terms of things that people can do individually, I agree with Darren, where people are very confident. There are tools, there are digital tools, there are habits and skills that they can gain that can really help them to take control. But ultimately, they can use these kind of financial capability and resilience skills to help them. I think, however, there are other people, as Lee said, who are at the bottom of the scale, who are more facing, those problems around mental health issues and stuff like that, and they're feeling overwhelmed essentially, so they need a little bit more support. And I'd say there's a few things that you can do to help. We've got the tools and the tips and the skills that people can practice, but sometimes when you're in that mental state and the challenge is too much, it's going to be difficult for you to act on those things yourself. So I would also say it's good to talk. Let's talk to people within our community, but most importantly, talk to specialists about it so that we can know and be signposted to the right places to go. There might be things we can do, but there'll always be specialists and experts out there who can tell us additional things that might help us in our specific situation. I'd say go on training. If there's training available in your workplace or anything around sort of financial capability, find out a bit about that. We can always learn a bit more. It doesn't matter if you've got loads of money or if you've got no money. There's always more that can be learned. To talk to specialists, go on training. I'd also say it's important to try and get buddies, coaches, mentors, and especially people with lived experience. A bit like AA, this is a problem that's affecting our society. If someone has, if someone's an alcoholic, they have to accept that there's a problem there. And often having coaches, buddies, and mentors, people who can help you through that, who can talk about it, but also experts as well, who can give you expert strategies to deal with it. These all help us to really get through that journey. You know, the complexity of debt and money issues, it's like a dark tunnel. They can help us get to the light at the end of the tunnel on the other side. So talking to others about it, talking to specialists, go on training, get mentors, coaches, buddies, and you know, where you can, be proactive and volunteer. Like I said, 75% of our team at Money A&E are ex-service users, and once they've experienced the support, they've wanted to share that and give it to others as well. So if you can and you want to volunteer and support others, especially if you've got through to the other side at the end of it as well. So those are a few points I would say about helping people take control, but I've also talked about the policy side of it, which is really important.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I think you also touched already, everyone, you touched already on the question, like what advice would you give to people who are worried about the financial situation? And here I'm conscious, for example, also about like people who maybe face levels of high debt or unexpected expenses. So maybe answering here a bit more like focused questions on how can people manage their finances if they really struggle in the moment right now.
I'm happy to kick in there. I think Jerry will back me up here as well. I mean, obviously, if anyone is struggling, it's really important to, you know, to sort of get the support that you need as soon as possible. There is some really interesting things in the UK. I mean, first of all, again, I'll just flag up the benefit system and the safety net. It's not just benefits, there are charitable grants, there are help for energy and water bills, which can provide a level of financial support and security. It's essential that you get some advice with that to know where you stand. You can do things like visit the Turn to Us website, but also especially being able to actually talk to someone about your benefits is obviously really, really useful. That's where organisations like, you know, Money A&E, IncomeMax, Citizens Advice, you know, all who provide, you know, benefits advice and income maximisation support around that. Debt advice is obviously incredibly important. Trying to get the debt advice you need, whether it's from a community-based organisation like Money A&E or a national charity like Step Change. You've obviously got National Debt Line as a telephone line that people can make a call to do. There are formal debt options that people can sign up to. They're slightly different depending on where you live in the United Kingdom. But generally, you know, they involve restructuring your debts and, you know, sort of, you know, trying to pay them back or whatever. But obviously that needs to be done with a qualified debt advisor. And Jerry, I'm sure you can pick up this conversation. Just, it's about as advice and support, isn't it? Please don't suffer in silence. Reach out and get the help and support that you need.
Most definitely, Lee. Sorry, I was on mute there. But yeah, I think what Lee said is absolutely right. What happens is when people have debt problems, it's interlinked with so many different issues and it can't be dealt with on its own. So, you know, if someone is coming with a debt problem, they're often going to need additional support. So if they come into places like Money A&E, we can support with that. But also organisations like Lee's IncomeMax is so vitally important as well in terms of people being able to maximise their income in those difficult debt situations where they've kind of got no money on the table and need to get more to live and survive. It's so important. So yeah, pick up the phone, talk to people about it. You know, if you're worried about it, you need to talk to people about it. Talk to your nearest and dearest. Try and find specialists like Money A&E, IncomeMax as well, to try and get that kind of support, because like I said, debt is interlinked. Also, you know, you may have mental health issues as well. They need to be talking to mental health organisations, probably like Thrive as well, or other organisations that they can access like mine that will be able to help them with that. Like I said, it's interlinked. The Money and Pension Service also have some support. National Debt Line, as Lee said, Step Change. These are all telephone advice supporters as well. And it's really important to get that help. So talk about it. Try and find help from specialist teams, and a lot of this stuff is interlinked as well. If you can go to places where they can signpost you to the right other forms of support that come with debt, debt is never on its own, it's always interlinked with other issues. So You need to get the support around debt, but you also need to be linked to other levels of support that can help you around your specific situation. And it's important we're dealing with that together as well. So pick up the phone and call some of the organisations that we've spoken about here today. Money Only, IncomeMax, Money and Pension Service, National Deadline, Step Change.
Yeah, also when I'm looking at this with employers, one of the sort of rules of thumb we talk about is that if somebody finds themselves spending half their net income, half their net take-home pay just servicing debt, then at that stage, you're going to need third-party help. And you just don't be proud. You know, and in the most companies nowadays, there are things called an employee assistance program. It is an employee benefit. Sometimes an employer pays for these for you to use. Sometimes they are part of one of their employee benefit products. So they might be part of a life cover scheme or a death insert or an income protection scheme. But these employee assistance programs, they're totally and utterly confidential. Your employer does not know who's called. The employer will know that somebody has called up, but they will not know who was called. Okay, they're totally confidential. You can ring them up, and often what they will do, they can give you half a dozen telephone counselling sessions. You can even have, with a lot of them, face-to-face counselling sessions with experts, like some of the ones that are being discussed today. So they're there for you to use. But do you know what? These employee assistance programs are so badly promoted. They are there. They're so underused. It is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I know for a fact that some of the providers of insurances for employees provide them for free, and the reason they can provide them for free because they're an additional feature they can bolt on when they're selling their proposition, but they know that hardly anybody's using them, so let's use them. You know, they're there for you to really help. Now, if your situation is that, you know, you are maybe 30-40% of your income is servicing debt, then you probably can go on your own a wee bit there, and there is an opportunity there. And one of the things I always look at the psychological side of this about making progress and getting these things sorted out. Now, we need to look at, if I don't change, where I'm going to end up, and that's a good place to start. We don't like the look of that, so we need to get that emotional moment to change. And if, let's say someone's got 3 credit cards, what I always say, look, take the 3 credit cards, look at the 2 biggest ones, put them to one side, pay the minimum payment on those, but pay down as much as you can on the small one. Because what happens is you'll get rid of one of them, and psychologically you're down to 2. And that is progress, and that you need that because it gives you energy. Then you focus on the second biggest one, pay the minimum on the big one, pay down as much as you can on the second one, and then you're down to 1. And, you know, maybe over a year or 2 or 3, you can start to chip away at these things, get in control of them, get rid of them. But each time you get rid of a card, you're down to 1. Psychologically, you can physically see progress. When you're paying a little bit off all 3 of them, nothing seems to change, and you lose heart. Once you've got to the 3rd one paid off, you're used to paying that money out every month. Why not convert that to savings? You were living without it before. Maybe you can live without it now, defer that money for another time in the future when you need it, and give yourself much more resilience because you've got some cash rather than you've got a lot of debt. So that's just from my perspective.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Darren, and thank you very much, Lee and Jerry. I'm conscious of time here. We have a couple of minutes left for our audience to ask questions. So we have one question already in the Q&A function. What can be done at school level to teach, discuss and support with money management issues within families as early as possible?
We do work in primary schools and also in secondary schools. And in primary schools, it's really important to engage with the parents, giving them the skills, because parents are obviously the biggest and earliest teacher. So we think that engaging parents and training up to be confident about how to manage money is important. In our secondary schools, I mentioned about asking employers and employees to potentially volunteer and support some of the young people that we work with. We offer them what's equivalent to a GCSE in personal finance, and they train lots of people, get loads of great skills, but we want to give them employability skills as well. A lot of them are 16 plus and they're about to go into uni or employment, and we think that ability to give them that kind of financial education knowledge, but also that employability knowledge, is going to put them in really good stead, so that we're really training the next generation. I didn't get taught this stuff at school, and I had loads of money problems, hence the reason I started Money NE. So I think it's so important that we have it on the curriculum for our 16-year-olds, and with parents embedding this in their children at a younger age in the primary school and when their kids are in children's centres.
Great, yeah, I agree.
I've got a quick answer on that. I think that I did an economics at school, and it was all mechanics. You know, I remember sitting in that classroom. I got the O level in the end, you know, no problem. I found the subject quite fascinating. But one thing they absolutely missed out completely was my motivation, my why. Why? You know, I learned about banking, I learned about investments, I learned about interest and compound interest rates, but no one talked about habits and behaviours and the why, and that's the key thing. So in schools, I don't think we need to go into mechanics too much. We need to go into, what would your life be like if you had these habits? What would your life be like if you had alternative habits, good habits? And get people sold on that whole idea. If we go back to 30, I started doing this job 31 years ago, and all I've done is persuade people to save money for 31 years. It was kind of cultural then. It wasn't difficult. People did it. That was the way it was, because there were 300,000 people out there who were working for insurance companies, persuading people to take out savings plans. And whilst the plans weren't brilliant, the habits were absolutely brilliant. And they're all gone. You know, we're down to 11, 12,000 people now that can advise on money. And they only work with people who've already got a lot. So in schools, it's not about the mechanical, you know, technical stuff. It's about living your life and always putting aside an amount. One great book to read, The Richest Man in Babylon. That's a recommendation to anyone out there. Read The Richest Man in Babylon. It's really easy to read, like a fable, but it just explains the whole concept.
I mean, 1 in 3 kids are growing up in poverty and are going to need these skills. That is so important. And like Darren said, it's got to be related to life, you know, how are they going to use these skills when they get into the wider world?
Yeah, totally. So much has been done on education as well. Just obviously sending a big shout to Martin Lewis, campaigns passionately on education for young people and money education. He works with an organisation called Young-Enterprise. So if you visit the website young-enterprise.org.uk, including things like free textbooks. Now, he's actually taken this a step further now, that adults can do an open university education course, which, exactly as you described, Darren, is all about those mechanics. You know, you can learn about interest rates and all that kind of stuff. But I absolutely want to echo here what Darren's saying. The behaviour side of things is something that gets overlooked so much, because Jerry, our friend Kieran at My Cognition, and the work that he's doing around mental health, he always says to me, it's all about the behaviours, Lee. So somehow or another, we've got to match the technical expertise with the way that you know, that we do things in this country, whether that's through borrowing and saving, or the way that we invest for retirement, etc., etc. And I think Darren is absolutely right. We need to become a nation of savers and thrifters and people that really know what they're doing with money, because we've been sold a duff dream around this commercialism: pay now, buy now, pay for it later. All on the never, never. It'll all work itself out. We've got to change. We've got to change back to, you know, people that know how to look after our money and stay in control. And it's going to make us feel better at the end of the day. So yeah, it's not easy. Yeah, it's the other side of it. It's not easy to get there too, you know.
Yeah, we have time for one more question. Jerica had one. Can you advise on investment and methods of saving now that the interest rates are so low?
I mean, we can always send people to specialists who would be able to give lots of qualified advice on this, which is really important. So we would definitely signpost people in the right direction for that. And it is important, when you do have money, that you know what to do with it so that it can grow and move forward. Darren, did you have anything that you wanted to kind of say on this point?
Yeah, I mean, they've got to be very careful being a regulated entity and talking about advising someone. Like, you know, we need to know tons more about somebody. I think the key thing is, you know, interest rates are low. They've been low for a decade. You know, it's not something new. You know, they've dropped from 0.5% to 0.1. I mean, when I first bought a house going back to the late 80s, I was paying 15.5% interest. You know, so interest rates are low for sure, and you're not going to get much return on cash in a bank, no question. But we do need instantly accessible emergency money. So I would always recommend to people at least have 3 months or 6 months of your expenses, if you can, build that up. If you can't do that, target £500 for now, that is just instantly accessible, put to one side, just to stop you having a problem, because we will get things will happen to us in life that we don't expect, emergencies. And this is not for emergencies. This is for when you have to find the money. If you haven't got it, you go into debt. This is to avoid high interest debt. So that's the first bit. The second bit is then we've all got pensions at work. It's the bit in the middle. Okay, and so therefore we need to get the money doing some of the work for us. There's loads of tools out there. There's no advisors out there anymore that persuading anyone to save. They're only dealing with people who've already got money. Okay, so we need to persuade ourselves to save. And we need to focus on our why, because I'll tell you what, when you want to do it bad enough, you will find the how. And there's, you've got the internet at your mercy. There's always ways of investing money. You can learn about it, as long as you've got a strong enough reason to do that. Look for things called robo advisors. That's a great place to go, where they'll walk you through a process of decisions to give you an investment strategy if you want to do that. So if you Google robo-advisors, there's lots of companies out there that can help you with that, and you don't have to pay lots of money for an advisor that way.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. We're running out of time. If you have more questions, feel free to send us Thrive an email, johanna.thrive@uk.com, and we are happy to forward it to one of our panelists. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. I believe this was very helpful, 100% for me. So thank you for our guest speakers for joining us today, and thank you for our audience to being so present and joining us today. So have a lovely day, and thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Joanna. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Lee.
Nice to meet you, Jerry and Lee. Take care.
You too, Darren.
Take care, guys.
Thanks. Make sure you have a lovely day.
And you.